let Bitcoin pay for your house. Michael Saylor from MicroStrategy recently shared this, putting his finger right on the sore spot. House prices are falling compared to Bitcoin, yet a lot of money is being created without limit.
In 2012, you needed 30 Bitcoin to buy this house. A decade later, it would only cost you 20 Bitcoin. And today, it could be yours for 5. If home prices keep falling in Bitcoin, why do they keep rising in dollars?
So Michael Saylor's message is clear. We are probably witnessing the greatest transfer of wealth in history, and we're experiencing it live right now. And remember, before we continue, to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. There are new videos every day. And about 3 years ago, I talked for the first time in a video about the scarcity of Bitcoin, because we know there are only 21 million Bitcoin and not everyone can own a whole one. But it wasn't until the crypto exchange FTX went bankrupt, which was predictable, that we started hearing a lot about the shortage of Bitcoin. The Bitcoins were withdrawn from the exchanges and ended up in the hands of very wealthy people. And about a year ago, we learned that 90% of all Bitcoin are held by large wallets, and these belong to companies, institutions, and perhaps even governments who are buying more and more Bitcoin. And even years ago, there were reports about wallets that only bought but never sold Bitcoin. And that made a lot of people uneasy, because they wondered why these wallets have so much Bitcoin, keep buying more, and never sell any. The reason is that these companies and institutions have been buying Bitcoin since 2014, often in secret. And I think they didn't know how valuable Bitcoin would become, otherwise they would have bought much, much more. And in the years 2018, 2019, 2022, and 2023, when the market was performing poorly, many ordinary people bought Bitcoin when prices were high and then sold when they fell. They left the market because they thought Bitcoin would never rise again. But the big wallets kept buying, although they bought slowly. They didn't buy everything at once, but instead kept buying Bitcoin continuously over the years. And if you know that the market cycle lasts 4 years, then you can buy slowly over 3.5 years. For example, you could now buy $7 million worth of Bitcoin every day. And for many ordinary people, that's a lot of money. But for many companies, it's absolutely not. But that's exactly what they did. And when it became known that 90% of all Bitcoin are held by a few people, many found that unfair and said Bitcoin was centralized. But you also had the opportunity to buy Bitcoin when it was cheap. Bitcoin was once at $1,000, at $1,800, $2,000, $2,500. You might have heard about it when the Bitcoin price was at $100, at $300, up to $700. But time goes by, and that's the problem. Time passes, and these people don't stop buying Bitcoin. And over time, there are more and more Bitcoin halvings where the amount of new Bitcoin created is cut in half. The halvings in 2028 and 2032 are expected to be really major events. The 2032 halving will even take us so far that new Bitcoins will only be mined in Satoshis, meaning tiny fractions of a whole Bitcoin and no longer as a whole Bitcoin. And when I heard this news, I thought to myself, of course, that makes total sense and shows where things could be headed. And lately, I've often talked and thought about other things like land, water, and so on, although water really shouldn't be considered an asset, and also about real estate. Again and again, you hear the news that rich people are buying up everything, that they're trying to buy up the land, the lakes, the reverser, maybe even tokenize them in the future in order to buy them. Just take a look at the whole thing. It really seems grim if this actually comes our way. And they're also buying up the houses as well. And if Bitcoin is ever worth several $1 million per coin, it makes sense that wealthy people will keep buying it. And the head of the crypto company Bitwise even said that 95% of Bitcoins are already locked away. And here's the kicker. He also said that 95% of the world's wealth hasn't even touched Bitcoin yet. The trick with wealth and assets is to get in early, before anyone else even realizes there's something to be gained. And if 95% of Bitcoins are already gone, and companies, and I think there are even 15 of them publicly announced that they're buying Bitcoin, for example, 10,000, 33,000, or even 50,000 or 100,000 Bitcoins for their reserves, then there's a problem. There simply isn't enough for everyone. And at some point, he even says, people will realize how little Bitcoin is left, and then the real fight will begin. When governments, companies, and corporations want to buy up the rest, or actually do buy up the restand, the price rises to millions, Bitcoin will be the thing you absolutely want to have and to hold. That's why Michael Saylor shared this with the video as well. And that's why I'm telling you, understand how early you still are right now. This really is just the beginning, because we're still far from a Bitcoin price of $1 million or even higher.
Talk to me about where you expect the value to go longer term for the assets. Yeah, well, I think, Bitcoin is at a new all-time high. Bitcoin is coming into the world as digital gold. That's a massive market. We think Bitcoin could get to $1 million within the next 5 years. What the stablecoin bill is, it really unlocks the non-Bitcoin parts of crypto, the assets like Ethereum and Solana that facilitates the movement of things like stablecoins around the world. I think we're in the early days. This is akin to investing in the internet in 1996. I think we're going to look back in 5 or 10 years and find it funny that we were skeptical of crypto. I think we'll be using it in our day-to-day lives. So this is, a unique generational investment opportunity for.
And right now, we're seeing companies, corporations, and even countries starting to get rid of the US dollar and even the euro. And in the last 2 months, many companies have said that they are buying Bitcoin, selling their gold and other assets, and turning away from the dollar. And the more money from all over the world flows into Bitcoin because it is limited and cannot simply be printed out of thin air like the dollar, the euro, or the yen, higher the price of Bitcoin will go. But 95% of it is already gone. It's held by addresses that only buy and never sell. And that's the reason why Bitcoin keeps getting more valuable, while so little of it is still freely available. And you've probably seen news reports saying that money has been withdrawn from Bitcoin or Ethereum ETFs. That often sounds like something bad has happened, but you know what? Often, only a small portion of the money is actually sold. Analysts even show that only about 5% of the money in Bitcoin ETFs is actually sold, and the rest flows back in. And then it looks like interest is fading, which ends up in the news, scares people, and makes them sell their Bitcoin or even Ethereum. For example, when it's reported that $27 million were withdrawn, even though much more was invested in the days before, and then these 27 million are on everyone's lips and the price drops because people think something is wrong. And now just imagine, 95% of the world's wealth still hasn't been invested in Bitcoin. That means if more people and large institutions start investing in Bitcoin, the price could really skyrocket. Because unlike the dollar or the euro, there simply isn't an unlimited supply of Bitcoin. And some experts even think that the market is currently being manipulated. Normally, when more people buy, the price goes up, but that's not the case right now. They even believe it's a kind of trick to unsettle investors. But there's also good news. We might now be in a long bull market that could last for years. That's because it's not just regular people like us, the individual investors, but also large institutions and even governments around the world who are investing in Bitcoin, and they're doing so consistently. In the USA, Europe, and the Middle East, there is growing interest, and many companies have even announced that they want to invest in Bitcoin and include it in their balance sheets. And it could really drive the market in the coming years. Companies like MicroStrategy, Capital 21, and the Blockchain Group are buying Bitcoin. And those are just the ones making it public. BlackRock is also buying massive amounts of Bitcoin. Many other companies and wealthy individuals are doing the same, but quietly in the background without announcing it or making a big deal out of it. And every time Bitcoins are sold, they are quickly bought up again. In fact, the amount of Bitcoin on crypto exchanges is at its lowest level in 10 years. And that shows just how much demand there is for Bitcoin. And you've probably already heard, or you surely know, that the official inflation rate of the US dollar or the euro is around 2 to 3%. But many people believe that in reality, it's much, much higher, maybe 10, 15, 20%, or even significantly more. Just take a look at supermarket prices and see how much food prices have risen in recent years. That's not 1 or 2%, or even 3%, but rather 30%, 50%, or even more. Bitcoin, on the other hand, has an inflation rate of only 0.84%. This means that the value of Bitcoin decreases much more slowly than that of traditional currencies like the dollar or the euro. And for comparison, gold has an inflation rate of 1 to 2%, and although gold is often considered rare, it's not as rare as people think. There's even information available that shows it's not that rare. Bitcoin, for example, is actually rarer than gold and its supply is limited. And just take a look at why Bitcoin could be better than gold. A man from Germany fails to declare gold at the border 30 days in jail. That doesn't happen with Bitcoin, and with Bitcoin we only have 2 major halvings left, and Bitcoin halvings are events where the reward for mining new Bitcoins is cut in half, which reduces the rate at which new Bitcoins are created. And after these upcoming halvings, the value of a single Bitcoin could rise to millions of dollars. That's why it's important that you take the time now to review your portfolio and decide whether Bitcoin is the right investment for you, and maybe even, if you don't already have Bitcoin in your portfolio, to add it. Because if governments and corporations continue to buy Bitcoin and eventually own the majority of all Bitcoins, you could be among the few who still have some. There are billions of people in the world, and many of them will never have the chance to own as much Bitcoin as you might be able to right now. So think about whether you want to be part of this small group. Buy Bitcoiners is not financial advisor. At least hold a small portion of Bitcoin in your portfolio. Otherwise, if you want to achieve financial independence through crypto now and want to know which cryptocurrencies I invest in, click the link in the description below the video. Learn about Bitcoin, learn about crypto, understand how the market works, and I hope you enjoyed this and have a great day, that you were able to take something away from it. And wherever you are, thank you for watching and listening.